So I was ordained by the American Jewish University in 2006, and I had a small congregation for 1 year, and I've been working as a hospice chaplain for 4 years now at Providence Trinity Care Hospice. And I am currently in my 4th unit of CPE, but what I want to talk to you about is my 1st unit of CPE, because I think that kind of relates a little bit more to your experience. So I did my 1st unit of CPE the summer after my 1st year of rabbinical school at Providence St. Joseph's Hospital in Burbank. And I specifically wanted to be at a Catholic hospital because I felt that I could learn a lot from Catholics about the connection between spirituality and illness, because Catholics have such a long history of working in healthcare. And then the other reason is that although at the time I was actually kind of very uncomfortable around Christians, and I didn't even feel comfortable saying or practically hearing Jesus, I had always heard about Christians talk about Jesus' love. And so I felt like there was something for me to learn from the Catholics about the relationship between spirituality and love. At the time when I did that CPE unit, my intention was to be a congregational rabbi. So I went in there with that intention. It wasn't because I thought I was going to be a chaplain. I didn't think I was going to be a chaplain. But that CPE unit was just such an incredible experience. Something that was so empowering for me was that that was the first time that I really felt like a rabbi. People, called me rabbi, and there I was having like a real pastoral presence in the hospital, and so that was pretty empowering. But I was completely terrified of being a chaplain. I mean, I was uncomfortable walking into a hospital room and approaching new patients, and I was afraid that they'd reject me. I was worried that I would get nauseous if I saw blood or guts or blood, if they were sick. I was really nervous about that. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to keep my feelings under control, and that if somebody else was crying, then I'd start crying. Or how was I going to respond with intense suffering? And I had no clue how to pray spontaneously with other people. And, well, they sure didn't teach us in rabbinical school. I don't know if it's different here. Probably not. So in CPE, I learned to work with all of my fears through the CPE action, reflection, clinical method of learning, because you just jump in and you are a chaplain, and then afterwards we would reflect on our experience by writing and by processing with our CPE peers and with our supervisor. And so all of those things that I listed that I was uncomfortable with, I basically, it turned out I got comfortable going into the hospital room, and I ended up fine around blood and guts. And it turns out that when somebody else is really emotional, I found that that didn't make me get all emotional, that I kind of was there for them and not, I didn't start crying. But one of the best things that I learned was how to pray spontaneously. In fact, there was somebody in my CPE peer group, and he kind of gave me a formula, and I basically use that formula today. It's so good to be in an interfaith CPE peer group, because whatever prejudices you may have, they break down when you're talking to people. And I really didn't know about all the diversity that exists within Christianity until I did that first CPE unit, and I learned so much about Christianity. That was so helpful for me, and all the divisions among Christians. And another thing that was so good was that I really, because they didn't know very much about Judaism, I had to really clarify my own perspectives on Judaism in order to communicate to them. Other things, I learned about something called spiritual direction, which is kind of like spiritual counseling, and that was really great. And I ended up having a spiritual director for quite a few years after that. I learned all kinds of great pastoral counseling skills. I learned, I got a list of questions to ask people to deepen a spiritual interaction with them. information about how to deal with grief. And although in rabbinical school I had a year-long course in pastoral counseling, I learned more in those 2 months of CPE for sure than I learned in that whole year. I got to witness the birth of a baby, and I got to witness the death of a man. I ministered to Jews and to non-Jews and to people of so many different ethnic backgrounds. I spent time with a man in his 20s whose wife had shot him and he was paralyzed. I spent time with a woman whose fetus died inside her. I spent time with an old woman who wanted me to say a prayer to help her die. And I listened and I offered them my compassionate presence, and their stories enrich me still. I still remember them. So, like I said, I didn't do that CPE unit because I thought I was going to be a chaplain. I thought I was going to be a congregational rabbi, which I was for 1 year. And those skills that I learned in CPE, they did help me in the congregation. They did help me when I counseled people. And maybe most importantly, I learned so much about myself. And even though I'd had a lot of psychotherapy before that, the learning in CPE is just so deep. You know, I would describe an 8-hour day of CPE as kind of like group counseling for 8 hours. So, you know, I'm not going to lie to you, it's emotionally draining. But it's so worthwhile. I think CPE provides great training in all kinds of life skills, like learning about yourself and improving your listening and your communication skills. And through CPE, I tremendously grew personally and professionally. And I think it's great that it's required of you guys, because I think it should be. The benefits are so intense, so immense. And so I just wish you a very positive CPE experience, and sometimes positive